an Undertow content podcast.
Undertow Content acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people Australia-wide. From Undertow Content, you're listening to Cut, the podcast where we deep dive into the many facets of the entertainment industry, both locally and internationally.
We're bringing you unfiltered stories and raw insights with no gatekeeping.
No gatekeeping, fly the gates open.
Keep them open. We're your hosts,
Amanda Browne
and Nell Nakkan. Today's show is one you are going to want to grab a pad and pen for, or your notes app, whatever you're using these days, because we are chatting to Janine Lapworth, who is a lawyer and has worked across many areas in entertainment and business. First, though, our In the News segment this week is online series and the rise of YouTube.
We here at Undertow are very excited about this space, and the more we look into it and talk about it, where the entertainment industry is headed, the more we realise that audiences are turning to online platforms like YouTube to get information and content.
An article in Deadline by Dade Hayes says that viewing of YouTube content via TV screens now averages 1 billion hours a day.
Crazy.
I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Quoting an annual letter from YouTube CEO Neil Mohan about the increasing viewership of YouTube TV and the trends surrounding it, Hayes writes, viewing of YouTube content on TV screens long ago to statistic of the company at its Brandcast event for advertisers, has continued to grow as streaming's increasing overall dominance. Viewers are watching YouTube the way we used to sit down together for traditional TV shows on the biggest screen in the home with friends and family, writes Mohan.
There has been so much change in our industry, especially since COVID, and that's very much due to audiences. The article goes on to say that the expansion of living room audience is enlarging the pot of ad dollars, with proceeds filtering back to channel owners, Mohan said. There are now 3 million channels in the YouTube Partner Program, which has paid creators, artists, and media companies $70 billion over the past 3 years, more than any other creator monetization platform.
Wow.
Creators are thinking about how to optimize their content for the living room, and it's easy to see why. It's where their audience is watching, Mohan wrote. In the last 3 years, he added, the number of top creators getting a majority of their views on the big screen increased more than 400%. Bucking expectations, Shorts, YouTube's answer to TikTok, is contributing significantly to that upswing, the company has said.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've talked about this as well.
Crazy.
Yeah. I think it's undeniable that audiences are moving online.
Yeah.
Especially for short content. But the last few years, especially since streaming was introduced and now AI, things have changed so rapidly that it's hard to keep up sometimes. The industry has always moved remarkably fast, especially in places like the US. But the convergence of the tech world and entertainment has escalated that tenfold, to the point where even the practitioners in the industry who are part of that change can't even predict some things.
Oh, no, you cannot keep up. If we shift to another article from Investopedia.com published in November last year, Evan Tarver writes about 3 predictions for TV in the next 10 years. Reviewed by Thomas J. Catalano and fact-checked by Suzanne Kvilhag, the first point Tarver makes is freedom to choose, explaining that the cable TV industry has traditionally featured a lineup of popular channels that customers purchase as packages. He goes on to say, then streaming services such as YouTube, HBO, Hulu, Netflix, Apple TV, and Amazon Prime showed up, offering huge libraries of content at lower prices with zero or very little advertising. These developments stripped cable TV companies of millions of customers.
Yep. Elements like the influx of streaming providers, families cutting the cord of cable and satellite TV, and more specifically in the US, the quote-unquote unbundling of cable and the great rebundling of multiple streaming channels are contributing to the change in consumer behaviours. The second point Tarver makes is that commercials become antiquated, saying that streaming services are beginning to introduce commercials into their business models, but not to the same extent as cable TV companies. They offer the option to pay more and not see them. And customers who do opt for ads in order to pay less have to put up with much shorter commercials.
So true. And also back to the point about the great rebundling of multiple streaming channels. That happens in Australia too. I know Hamish and Andy, there's one that they do that's...
Hubble,
that's it. Thank you. The third prediction in the article is more interactivity, meaning that TVs are becoming much more interactive. In 2024, smart TVs are a fixture in most households, allowing people to stream videos and music, browse the internet, view photos, and so on. He even goes on to say that the emerging technologies may see us sitting there with virtual eyewear and headsets.
I can't see that happening, really. Like, I know it is happening, but I just can't.
Well, I don't know. I feel like the younger generations
love that stuff.
Yeah, they love their tech. They've been brought up on it. So it may very well be their experience. I mean, I know there's already like the Google headset and stuff like that that's out there at the moment. So, there are certain headsets that have been created already. So it'll be interesting to see if it actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years ago, many of us did not think that linear TV wouldn't exist, but now it's becoming more and more of a reality. And if you look at the Australian broadcasters, all of them have streaming apps.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people who don't even have regular TV anymore. They just have a smart TV and they sign into all of their apps.
Yeah.
I think TV in the future, especially as we start to look at short form like YouTube and TikTok, they are all going to utilize the newest technology. Not only to advance the standards of the content, but also to save money for businesses. Whether this is good or bad, I think there are definitely two sides.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people have talked about how there are a lot of actors and directors and people coming out saying, I hate the word content.
Really?
But yeah, I've heard it a lot. But I do think that there are pros and cons to online. I think if there's a way to kind of encourage people to go back to the cinema and consume content online, like it's almost like encouraging people to look at screens more, but it's, there are pros and cons to...
Well, they are anyway.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to what YouTube and online can do for content.
I think there's only pros. I mean, I get the big picture con, but the pros for me as a creator, right? It's lower barrier to entry. It's so much easier to just pick up an iPhone and make something and whack it on. And if it's good, it will go. We know this through Undertow that it's a lower barrier to entry for funding in this country. And so digital is obviously something that the agencies are pushing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's an opportunity for new voices, new ideas, the ability to have a low budget. We're looking at things like the channels that are super niche, but they're cutting through because they're appealing to those audiences.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the big pro for us as a content and production company is when we do it right with a social strategy, we can use that as like a launch pad for a long form project as well.
100%. I also think you look at the kids and family space. And in Australia at the moment, the ABC is the only broadcaster really commissioning kids and family content on a regular basis as a consistent thing. So something that I know as industry knowledge, but also from my friends who have kids, YouTube is where they get their content from. And I know there are companies who are shifting towards a YouTube first strategy. And that makes sense because it's like if people aren't commissioning kids content and YouTube is where people are getting it from anyway, that makes complete sense. And I think for people, kids and family content is really important. It's so crucial. And I think that's what YouTube and online can do. It provides content and educational resources for kids.
And it's the solution to building that audience before the cart before the horse, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. It also gives you more, if you have an audience online already established, you have more control or, you have more to go into a negotiation with when it comes to your digital rights and when it comes to marketing and stuff like that. So if you...
Insights.
Yeah, exactly. You have insights, you have data, you know your audience better than the people you're pitching to. So when you're pitching a show, or if you want to take that web series and make it a long form, you've already done half the work. You've found the audience already.
Yeah, you're solving their problem for them.
Exactly. And that is really powerful. And it's also, that gives filmmakers and creators and companies who are creating this content more creative control because they've proved that their idea works and people are engaging with it. And that therefore leads to better content, I think, because it's already...
Power in their hands as well.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I agree with you. I think it's a wonderful tool, especially for TV and serial. I think when it comes to film, it's different. I mean, YouTube does offer pay-to-play kind of thing if you want to watch a movie or something on YouTube. So they do have that option. But I think it's very different for films. Short films, I think, can live on YouTube. But,
I think what's interesting that's changed, especially from like maybe 10 years ago when I would make a film and then when it was finished, you'd whack it on YouTube. Whereas now it's YouTube first.
Yeah. Build the audience. It's that build the audience strategy, isn't it? It's like,
Totally.
If you can build your own audience, you have more control.
That's the value.
Our expert today is Janine Lapworth. Now, Janine was my first call when we set up Undertow because if we knew anything at that stage, it was that we needed legal counsel from the word go. Janine is a Sydney-based entertainment lawyer who has broad corporate, commercial, intellectual property, entertainment and litigation experience.
She gained this experience at national and international law firms and in senior in-house legal positions at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation in Sydney and ESPN Star Sports in Singapore. She has worked with a wide range of clients based in Australia and overseas, including international studios, industry groups, tech startups, and other creative businesses. Most recently, she has worked as senior consultant with the Film&TV group at Simpsons Solicitors. As we mentioned earlier, you are going to want to take notes, so grab that pen and paper and enjoy our chat with Janine.
To start off with, why don't you tell us what it is that you do? And what do you think people should know about what you do?
So I'm an entertainment lawyer and I specialise in film and television production. I know that sounds really niche, but it's a really, really big job. It's so varied and you get involved in so many different things. So my work would involve advising creatives like writers, helping production companies finance a project, legaling a script to make sure it doesn't defame anyone, contracting cast, resolving disputes arising during the production, and working with studios, production houses, commissioning platforms, distributors. Everyone in the ecosystem gets helped out by the lawyers to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Film and TV lawyers like myself can be found externally at law firms. So I work for a law firm called Simpsons Solicitors, which is a boutique entertainment law firm. Or they're employed by the actual businesses that work in the film and television industry. So, for example, a production company would have an in-house lawyer, or commissioning platforms like the ABC or Stan. The studios, like when you think overseas, Warner Brothers, CBS, NBC Universal, they've all got a legal team internally. Now, when you're dealing with lawyers in this field, sometimes they're just the lawyer and sometimes they're more. And when they're working in-house, for example, for a production company, you might hear them being referred to as legal and business affairs or BLA, business and legal affairs. And that means that they also play a commercial role where they might be advising on commercial terms or they might actually be doing the commercial negotiations. So it really helps for you to know who you're dealing with. And what is their responsibility for the transaction? Are you talking about just what's written in a contract? Or are you needing to talk about bigger commercial issues, which that person might not actually be responsible for?
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot. I can imagine the teams within the big studio. Are they quite big, the teams within the big studios?
Traditionally, and in the big studios, like over in Hollywood, there's a very clear distinction between your legal department and your business affairs department. And they work very, very differently and they rarely cross over. In Australia, there aren't those sorts of studio setups as such. And with some of the bigger organisations like the ABC, it's definitely legal and business affairs. But especially if you're dealing with a small production company, you might have one person who straddles both. Having said that, there are cuts all the time. The business is changing all the time. And the first thing that gets cut, the back-end operations that don't bring in money, they cost money. So legal departments, which were traditionally big, are now shrinking all the time.
It's a risk, I guess, getting rid of the legal, because legal is everything, especially in our world. You need legal.
Number one.
Yeah.
And I think one of the frustrating things is because it changes so quickly and every project is so specific, you can't really have a template at the beginning that will just cover everything. It always has to be customised so much for each project that you do need to constantly involve people. And one good example of that is I've worked on a number of television shows that have had more than one season. And you'd think once one season's done, all's good. But that's not the case. Season 2 could be just as complicated, if not more. There's one show where they wanted to increase the number of episodes for a future season, and that caused all sorts of problems in contracting people who had only agreed to commit to, say, 8 episodes. So there are all sorts of things along the way that you have to keep the lawyers involved in.
It's so much. It's so much.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I guess the more you know, the better you can work with your team, because like obviously things like longer contracts or, you know, specific requirements, like is the cast going to do press? How long does that go for? Just all the things.
Yeah, that's right. And things also like being able to look at what a producer in particular needs from all the different people, right? You might have a really clear idea of your finance that you have and how much it will cost to do a production. But have you factored in the studio's technical requirements, that they need a particular format to be used, that they need a particular version that gets, you know, edited from the one that you are using in Australia? So all of these things, you need to know about it to be able to factor it in. And I think that's probably the thing that I came back to when, you know, what can I tell you? Knowledge is power. And I think it's really, really important that you know even the unknowns so that you can recognise them when you see them.
Oh, I wouldn't have even thought, like, there are things that you wouldn't even think of, and you wouldn't know if you are a producer from Australia and you suddenly get a deal with a biggest American company, a big American studio, and you haven't worked with them before, or you had limited access to how they work. It is a huge beast of a thing.
And especially if you're working with a big overseas entity like a studio, you have to be very careful about communication. It might be that you have to loop in not just the person that you deal with every day on a creative level, but their legal team, their business affairs team, their marketing team. And unless you're actually involving everyone, information can get lost. And so I think it's really important to always think about what relationships are there and who needs to be involved in whatever the communication is.
Is that a barrier for like Australian productions? Because that can seem a little bit daunting to do something wrong and then it costs the production or whatever.
I think that it's sort of the responsibility of both parties. Sure. And normally if you're a new starter, you know, like a production company that a studio hasn't worked with before, there's a long time spent working on the relationship and making sure that everyone knows who everyone is. One thing that helps with that is just to actually ask the question up front and just to say who needs to be looped in. Do we loop in everyone, or does this person only get looped in on some things? So business affairs and legal, they might be across much more than marketing. But just always ask the question, and that will always put you in a better stead than just dealing with one person and then saying, oh, I didn't know that you were supposed to be on this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So where did you start? What drew you to this industry?
I come from a bit of a creative background, both through music and writing. So when I thought about careers, neither of them really looked like they'd pay much.
You are so smart.
And also none of my creative pursuits were getting very far. So as a frustrated creative, I thought the next best thing would be to support less frustrated creatives. Mm-hmm. And so when I went through law school, I specialised in intellectual property, which is the only thing that they teach at law school that's anywhere near this. So film and entertainment law doesn't become something until you specialise much later on. So I started working in intellectual property at a law firm and found that that was actually more trademarks, distribution agreements, patents, you know, all of that sort of thing. So it still wasn't as creative as I would have liked. And whenever we did get something like a chain of title review for a producer or a financier or something like that, I'd just go, yes. So I realised about 4 years in that it wasn't going to happen down that path. It was a very big American law firm, so chances for them getting that kind of work would be low because they charge so much beyond the budgets of most creative businesses. So I just quit my job and just said, I am going to just look for anything in entertainment law and I'll just wait until something comes because it's not happening here. And 2 weeks later, I was working at the ABC.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
So I've basically just gone from working in-house at the ABC and then I went over to ESPN Sports in Singapore. I came back. There were a couple of babies involved. So I consulted for a while, set up my own law firm. And then by the time COVID came along, I was sick of self-isolating at home at the kitchen table, which I'd been doing for many years. So that's when I joined the firm, just so that I had that community.
I feel like as a creative, you want that too. I feel like creatives need their community. Like there are some people who are really introverted and for them being on their own is really important. But I feel like in the creative industries, having your community is so important and so much a part of how we learn and thrive and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. And I think particularly with things changing so quickly in any industry, it's really important that you have someone to sound ideas off because you're encountering new things all the time. Every day there's a new thing that you've never seen before, even if you've been doing it for 20 years. And it's just really nice not only to rely on your own experience, but the experience of others to make sure that you've adopted the best approach for a problem.
At what point in someone's career or in a production should someone engage you and your services? How does it all work?
Okay, so basically, if you're embarking on a new project, whether that be a new business or a new creative project, it's always good to check in with a lawyer so that you know what the problems are or might be before they occur. If you don't get all the necessary rights at the outset of, say, a film project, it could cost you a lot more down the line to buy the rights, or it might stop you completely. And I've seen a lot of productions which have gone no further, passion projects, because of a problem that should have been resolved at the outset and was too hard to fix later on when people realised what money could be involved. So that's a good first step. Always think, well, I need a lawyer. Now, you're thinking, I have no money. How can I pay for a lawyer? And there are people out there who can help. So Arts Law is a wonderful organisation that's been going for decades, and they offer a whole range of services from telephone advice to contract review. Some of them do cost a little bit of money. Some of them are free. They also have templates that you can use as a starting point. And so there are ways that you can do it. Also, a number of industry organisations can help. For example, if you're a screenwriter, you go to the Australian Writers Guild. If you're a producer, you talk to the Screen Producers Association. So there are always people who can help. And also, if you find a really lovely lawyer, they might do some work for you pro bono until you've got that cash flow happening. So at the start, absolutely, get to know what you need to look out for. And then along the way, lawyers are involved everywhere. They're involved in development. So when you've got an idea, you want to engage a writer or you want to do some brainstorming, you make sure that you have the right contract for that. When you're talking to people, wanting to pitch ideas, and you're thinking, how do I protect myself with confidentiality? That's when we can help you with a non-disclosure agreement. And then as you go along financing a project, that's something where the lawyers get involved because the contracts have to be good. A lot of people who are willing to part with money are only willing to part with money if they're satisfied that you're operating appropriately and that all the necessary safeguards are in place to protect that money and protect their investment. And that's when the lawyers come in to make sure that all of those safeguards are there and everyone's clear as to how the process works. Then, of course, when you lead into production, contracting with cast, contracting with crew, managing unions, working with locations. When you have to use a particular location for a film shoot, you might need to make sure that you can recreate it later if you needed to. There are lots of different things that you need to do with locations when you're filming, hiring of film equipment, working with animals, working with children. So many different things that come up during a production, and then in exploitation as well in terms of marketing and making sure that everything that's happening is consistent across territories, because now everything goes online. So there's a lot that needs to be done at each stage of the production to make sure that everyone's interests have been taken care of. A lot of people see lawyers as obstacles and as someone who just stands there and goes, nah, you can't do it. All right, the killjoy. But really what lawyers are there to do is to think, well, what could go wrong? Okay, is that worth raising now? Let's make sure we've got a process for it so that the disaster doesn't happen. And even if it did, we can manage it.
Yeah, and it's a protection. I see lawyers as protection because a lawyer is going to stop me from doing something wrong that's going to get me in trouble later, but it's also going to protect my business, protect the people who work for my business, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's something that rather than seeing them as an obstacle, it's shifting the mindset to going, how are they good for me? Because something that I was going to say is that sometimes you see quite famous actors. They don't have a manager. They don't have an agent. The only person that they have is a lawyer. And I totally understand that because if you've got a lawyer like yourself who knows so much and you've got a career that's established enough that you're getting your own work, you do want that lawyer because they're going to protect you. It's not just the production companies that need lawyers. It's the creatives that need lawyers as well.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think it requires that sort of change in mindset for both parties. Just as you said, the client needs to think, okay, how can I protect myself? Could you help me protect myself? But also the lawyer doesn't necessarily say no, no, no. And for a busy lawyer who's doing a lot of commercial deals, the easiest thing for a lawyer to say is, nah, just don't even go there. And we don't have to think about how to manage it. Just don't go there. It's too hard. But what you want to do is find a lawyer who says, okay, these are the constraints. What can we do within that? Or how can we remove that constraint? It's about that sort of problem solving, joint problem solving. You bring the creative, I'll bring the mechanics, and let's see what we can do together.
It's interesting too, like that you bring up protection and how we think of lawyers as a barrier. There are so many people in the industry, especially early on, who are vulnerable and don't understand their rights, how things work, what they should agree to, what they shouldn't agree to.
Yeah.
I myself have later on gone, that was a bad move. If I'd consulted somebody on that, I would have been told to do this. And so it's like just educating people on this is a great thing to do. It's not maybe going to cost you a lot of money and it's only a positive.
Yes.
There's no actual downside to it.
Yeah. And it is. A lot of people say, well, it's a cost thing. But as you say, arts law is there. There are these organisations that can help you, AWG, SPA, all of that can assist if you don't have the funds to pay for a lawyer.
Exactly. And the other thing is there's a lot of material online. Arts Law has a lot of free resources on their website and they are of the quality that you can rely on. There's a lot of not quality stuff online, so you do have to be very careful. Please make sure that you can trust the information that you're getting. What might apply in the States doesn't necessarily apply here, particularly when it comes to use of copyright material. It's really, really important that when you are equipping yourself with that knowledge, that it's relevant knowledge and that it's quality knowledge rather than what somebody's put in Reddit. No offence to Reddit.
No, but it is. It's getting information from the right channels.
Yes.
What would you say is the hardest challenge that you've had to overcome in your career? And this could be you personally, or it could be like barriers that you face within this profession.
It would come as absolutely no surprise to anyone who's worked in law or worked in the screen industry that work-life balance would have to be the biggest challenge. And I often say to people, I absolutely love my work. It's just the workload. And that's something that I have to manage every day. Sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. And I think everybody in this room and everyone listening can probably relate to that. But that actually is the biggest thing. Everything else you can kind of work with.
Yeah, it is. Work-life balance is, even in Australia, we are all about work-life balance and all of that. But even in Australia and certain jobs and our industry in particular, it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard. So what trends are you noticing in the industry?
A big one, of course, is AI, so artificial intelligence. And I've spent a lot of time over the last year or two advising productions, producers, other lawyers about some of the issues that come up in our field in particular. It's making things both easier and trickier at every stage, from the birth of a project all the way through to marketing it, every single stage. There are so many AI tools that save time and money. And a lot of these have developed out of existing tools that we use all the time, especially when you're looking at visual effects. I talk to a visual effects company and they say, well, AI, that's sort of like we've always been doing it. Yeah. We've always had something that helps us duplicate the trees in the background or to come up with a different pattern for that pavement. But it isn't just. And the new sorts of artificial intelligence tools that people are using and have been using over the last couple of years, which are called generative artificial intelligence, they introduce an additional level of risk, not only to yourself, but to your work and to other people you're working with, both now and in the future. You don't know what's gone into the machine. You don't know what comes out of the machine. And with that sort of cycle, you're never quite sure what you're dealing with. Not even the people running the machines know. There's all this research being done on how does a machine actually work it out? You know, like they're sort of reverse engineering. And so if they don't know, how are we supposed to know? When you're thinking of all the things that you have to be thinking of, like copyright, contempt, defamation, Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights, child protection, criminal laws, all of those sorts of things that you have to be keeping an eye on whenever you're doing anything with content, you have no idea what the context of any of those pixels are and how they relate to what you're doing with them at the other end.
How does the law even keep up with that?
I was going to say the contract situation must be an absolute minefield.
Yeah, it is. And obviously the contracts, a lot of them, like industry contracts, haven't changed that much in the last 20 years. All right. And so we're sort of having to retrofit AI into the existing contracts because it takes so long for an industry level contract to change. So it is very much day by day, how do we work with this? No pressure in terms of all the things you have to think about when you're using AI, but it's just to sort of say, okay, it's there. I need to know where it fits in and how it's being used, and I need to track it. The trickiest part of all, though, is generative AI going to end up replacing the creative work we do. And I remember seeing a lovely sort of meme that encapsulated this. I'm not going to do it justice, but it said something along the lines of, I want AI to wash my dishes. I don't want it to paint my painting. Keep on the mundane, but let the creative still be a human activity.
Yeah.
Because that's what gives me satisfaction.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before because as a business owner, there are certain things that AI and ChatGPT can do for me that cuts my workload because I need it.
Yeah.
And we were saying there's space for it. It doesn't replace.
Exactly.
And I think that's such a key thing here. But what you're talking about hits it on the head. It's like, I want it to wash my dishes. I want it to do the mundane things, the admin stuff, or the thing that's going to get me into a deadline or something like that. Or it's editing. It's so true. We want to, I definitely want someone to wash my dishes. No problem.
It's crazy, isn't it? And even the whole, the strikes recently with the SAG contracts and just people being aware of what ramifications there are if things are agreed to. And it's just crazy.
It is changing all the time. I think also the awareness, as you say, is changing all the time. People are starting to try out different things. Let me give you an example. When you're coming up with a new project, would you ask ChatGPT for a couple of ideas, okay, which you're then going to claim as your own? You don't know where they came from. Will you use it like that? Some people probably already have. Some people have probably pitched a project to you that has come from using ChatGPT for brainstorming. What have they told you? Do you even know that there might be an issue and that somebody else might claim that you've actually stolen their idea? There's just so many things which you're going to have to think about. Every day a new scenario comes up. Someone finds a new way to use it. And then it's sort of like, okay, well, how does this fit in?
Even because I've been marking some assessments, some of the flags or checks that come up are things you wouldn't even think about. Like, for example, I know somebody got flagged for AI when all they had done was they'd typed it out in one document, copied paste into another, flag for AI.
The copy and paste as opposed to
typing it out.
Yeah.
Changing everything.
Yes. And of course, regulation is always many steps behind because the process of getting anything done at that sort of level is so difficult. So many people need to come on board and that sort of thing. So the rules only help you to an extent. They're always going to be obsolete and they're not going to cover whatever you're working with. And then the technical solutions to help, as you say, they're only as good as what people have thought of, the people behind it, and there's always going to be a mismatch as to what tools are out there and how you can manage them. And then there's another kind of big picture issue which is becoming more and more relevant on a daily basis for me, and that is just with all the changing business models, the sort of traditional way of doing a production or being involved as a creative is that you'd be paid something upfront, but then you'd always get something along the tail.
Like royalties.
Or a profit share, back end is what it's called, So that if it's a really successful project, you might not have been paid that much upfront, but you get rewarded for that success later on. That's the so-called traditional model. We talk traditional, but it's only been around for, decades. But now a lot of things are being done on more of a fee-for-service model. There are always people who are paid fee-for-services, but they're more at the bottom sort of level, if you want. Your vendors, the people providing a particular service to a production. Caterers, exactly. Those are all things where you'd expect a fee-for-service. You just get paid one amount up front. That's it. That covers your margin. That covers anything that you might want to do, investment in other things later on. It all comes out of the money you're paid for providing that service. Now, fee-for-service happens more at writer level, at producer level, like production company level. So that rather like when you're dealing with an SVOD platform, they might say, we'll pay you $10 million to come up with this show, but we're going to take all rights. And if it goes gangbusters, that's great. We get the benefit of that, but you don't. And that can be really heartbreaking for a number of reasons. Firstly, sustainability is that much harder when you don't get that windfall from a really successful show. And also it's just heartbreaking when you see someone else enjoy the fruits of your success.
Right.
I've been in that situation where it's just sort of like, so this thing that I put my heart and soul into and everyone is loving, it's got nothing to do with me now. It's out of my control.
That's such it's like, how do you change that? How do we change that model?
Knowledge, right? Up front.
Knowing.
Even 1%, like you worked at the ABC, there's a show that went gangbusters and there was no percentage. Even a percentage of a percentage would have been good.
That's true. And unfortunately, it's something about how the economics of the whole arrangement work. Traditionally, with television shows, for example, there were particular channels. Sales channels. Like you could put a show on cable, you could put a show on television. You had particular places where money would come, and then you get that money in as a license fee, and then you distribute to like the investors that all get a share and everyone's happy. But now, if it's going on an SVOD platform as one of 3 billion pieces of content, it's really hard to know how much success a Netflix can ascribe to your particular work.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a limit on the data that's shared.
There's a limit for the data that's shared, but also, so even if you say, well, that one got more views than anyone else, but also an SVOD platform has so many costs that aren't per product, and it's just really then difficult to say, well, how much of Netflix's success is due to the fact that 10 million people watched that show? So a lot of things just about how it's set up make it really hard for there to be a tail. And the thing is, again, this is something that changes every day because that kind of works all right when you're talking about SVOD taking something and keeping it forever and saying, I want to have this on my platform forever. But that's not how it's working now. You might have heard over the last couple of years that a lot of platforms are taking content down or not putting it up in the first place because of the costs involved, and they want to get some sort of tax advantage, which means nobody sees it. You've lost out on that income tail and, it's not going anywhere. But alongside that, maybe licensing will come back up again. That if a platform has spent the money on it and they can't use it for whatever reason, and it's not prohibited by tax rules or whatever, that they do start licensing it out again, which means there might be a back end. which means you might actually want to keep on asking for some sort of profit share. And then as well as all of that, who administers this? Who actually looks after the payment? This is starting to get really, really complicated. And there are so few people in the world who invest the money and time to have systems in place to deal with this sort of level of complexity, particularly when you start talking about cast members. In this place like Australia, because it's such a small industry, it just doesn't make economic sense for someone to put in that investment. And so even though in an ideal world, of course you'd get a back end, it actually, as a practical matter, gets really, really tricky, particularly with companies that merge, that are here one day, gone the next. It's really hard to actually track the money as well. So it's a really thorny question.
Yeah, far out.
But it's also risk too, isn't it? Like the business model question, some new producers would happily take the budget plus 10% because then great, we're done and we got that 10% rather than seeing how it goes and maybe not making the budget back or whatever.
That's absolutely true. And normally if someone's paying fee for service, that means that they're bearing all the risk of success or not. And what you sort of have to be careful of there is just be aware of what the risk is for you. So you sort of say, okay, they're taking the risk of failure. That might be all that you're interested in. But what about if in that success, what am I getting out of it? Is it enough for me that I've got that exposure? That could be worth squillions to me. If it is, then you're really happy to make that call, but make it from an informed place.
Yeah.
Bang on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what is a film that has influenced you?
I am so embarrassed about this. I was talking to a client today about negotiation tactics, and I said, it's like an Erin Brockovich.
Yes!
And she was going, what do you mean? And I said, when you put all the people from your office on one side of the table, even the mail boy, so that you've got more people than the people on the other side. So Erin Brockovich, I've referred to that. Yes. I've referred to the bargaining in Life of Browne. You offer 10 shekels. And I say, no, that's too much.
Yeah.
Going through that. So those are some things that I often think about in my day-to-day life where art and life meet. When I'm knee-deep in a production and the pressure's on, I think of Apollo 13.
Love it.
I just got chills.
Yeah, Gene Kranz, the flight director, they're trying to get the crew home, limited time, limited resources, and he says, let's work the problem, people. That's what I say to myself. I say to the people I'm working with, and we just, yes, there's pressure on us, but we're going to get through it. We're just going to focus on the immediate problem, get through that, and then do the next one.
I love this. You are such a beautiful marriage of creative and intelligence.
Yes.
Oh, it's so great.
That's why people love films, because they're just so inspiring. And you can pull moments from your own life and see. And
Oh, that's so great. I love that. How has your journey differed so far from what you expected?
It's really a question of almost like scope. I came to this field because I wanted the variety, I wanted the creative spark, I wanted to work with creative people, and it's delivered so much more than I'd hoped for. Sometimes that can be a difficult thing with work-life balance, as we mentioned, but generally that's what motivates me and gets me up in the morning is, oh, great, I get to work with that group of people on that project today, and that's wonderful.
And that must be really satisfying too, to see those projects get up.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
What's your best memory of your career to date?
I was hoping you were going to ask me about sets.
Oh, well, that can be...
Best memory on set?
Yes.
Okay. So we normally are kept away from the set. Nobody wants a lawyer on set finding problems, finding risks.
Yes.
So we're normally kept well away. But when I do get to visit, I absolutely love it. What I really love is seeing that shared vision come to life. It's always a team effort. And there's this really lovely energy that comes when everybody is on the same page, and especially with the really big budget ones where it's something that has only been able to come together with 100 people from everywhere working on this particular piece of construction or this particular backdrop or something like that. And you think, that is magic. And it really is. More specifically magic, in a physical sense, the illusions. Like you're on a set, there's something that is supposed to be a rocket ship. Of course, it's not a rocket ship. You've got the internal bit, you've got the external bit that's a small thing. The internal sort of setup, part of it is built, part of it is not. And the director might be doing a walkthrough and be saying, okay, so where are the lights positioned? Okay, so the light's going to be coming here. How will we make sure that they can't see the roof of the studio building we're in? Where does that door go? Because when someone is supposed to be coming in from another part of the spaceship, do they come through that door or do they come through that door? Where do I have to be prepared for them to appear? Where are the cameras going to go so that they don't see that actually there's just a bare wall behind us? So all of that kind of illusion I find fascinating. So I think it's that sort of enjoyment that has been the wonderful thing about having this kind of career.
And it's also like, keep the lawyers off. No, like, you know, if they can be there, everyone should enjoy.
And it's not just enjoyment, it's also understanding. If you want me to do a good job for you, I have to know what you're doing. And it's just really important. Some really, really successful filmmakers that I've heard speak, they always say that they make it their job to find out how the lighting person does their job, how the wardrobe people do it, what is happening in hair and makeup, what's happening in the set construction area, because that actually gives them a better idea of how this whole thing's going to fit together. And without that kind of knowledge of the whole, you're only seeing part of, yes.
Yeah. I think that's a message in general for across the industry now, is like, just know as much as you can, no matter what role you're in, know as much as you can. It makes things better and it helps your understanding rather than being so siloed as like, I'm an actor, that's my job, da da da. Know what everybody else is doing. What's your superpower, Janine?
It ties in very nicely to what you were just talking about. It's curiosity. I just love finding out about the universe, the world, the industry, my clients, their projects, because every single level I find connections, I find issues, I find things that I then bring in to my advice on my next project, because it's all interconnected.
What are you watching right now and where are you watching it?
I graze a lot because I try to keep up with everything that's going on. So I might not watch a full season of every show, but I do try to make sure I know what it's all about. Having said that, I'm really enjoying this season of Only Murders in the Building because it's very meta. It takes place in Hollywood and I get a kick out of some of the in-gags. So that's very embarrassing. I'm also looking forward to seeing a film at the Italian Film Festival, which I last saw this film in 2000. It left an impression on me and they're bringing it back for the 25th anniversary film festival, so I'm going to see that. So yes, but anything that engages will engage me.
What's that film called?
Pani e tulipani, or Bread and Tulips. Very good one.
What's one bit of advice that will actually help our listeners move their career forward?
My advice I've actually been given all the way through this recording, and that is think carefully before you give too much away. And that can apply to everything, a confidential idea, commercial arrangements, especially when you're starting out in the industry. You're going to be under pressure to concede everything in order to get a break. I've seen so many people who say, but you'll get exposure. And it's like, that might be all that you're interested in, but it's probably not. And you need to make an informed choice. You need to make that choice, whatever it is, from a place of knowledge, not ignorance. Your knowledge is your power. I'm here for you. You can find me on LinkedIn.
I already know we need a part 2 with Janine. There was so much information in there, and my goodness, I have no idea how she stores it all in her brain. I tell everyone I meet that talking to a lawyer is so crucial, especially for creatives who are creating IP and wanting to get it out there. Call a lawyer. Call Janine.
Yes, she is absolutely brilliant. Well, Cut listeners, that's it for this episode, and we always want to hear from you. Actually, we'd love to hear if you've had to call a lawyer, so comment on our socials, tell us your story, or get in touch with us over on our website, undertowcontent.com. See you next time.
Bye. Cut is an Undertow Content podcast. Your hosts are Amanda Browne and Nell Nakkan. Music composed by Genevieve Patrick, produced by Meg Hipwell and Ali Aitken.